Well, it's officially 100 days until the election. So that means it's 100 days to make sure your polling place hasn't changed, 100 days to figure out if you're going to vote by mail or vote in person. And of course, there's a lot that will happen between now and then. But we already know the stakes in this election. And Donald Trump just reminded us that in 100 days, it's really not just a normal election. It's an election where we decide if we still want to hold elections again.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
In 4 more years, you're not going to have to vote again. That's his words. Those aren't my words. That's Donald Trump's words. So those are the stakes. And yeah, it's frightening. It should be. The good news, though, is that a lot of good things happened this week for the Democratic ticket. The Harris campaign announced this morning that since last Sunday, they have raised $200 million. That's a lot of money, and recruited 170,000 new volunteers. And after a week of endorsements from some of the biggest names in the party, came an endorsement from arguably the biggest names in the party.
I can't have this phone call without saying to my girl Kamala, I am proud of you. This is going to be historic.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
The video was striking for me to watch because 16 years ago, I can't believe it's been that long, I had a front row seat on the Obama campaign. 16 years ago, the question of whether the country was ready was also raised. But then, as we all know, Barack Obama rode his own wave of optimism and momentum all the way into the White House. Now, they are different candidates. I'm not trying to make a direct comparison, and we are only a week into this new 2024 campaign. But my point is, what it all reminded me of was that once upon a time, Obama was the right candidate at the right moment. And he was able to capture the imagination of the country, in part because his campaign was focused on the future, at a time when the country was desperate for change. Back then, it was hope and change, and it was yes, we can. This time, at another inflection point in history, a different moment, Kamala Harris is putting her own spin on that message in a way that is unique to this moment. She did it in her first rally as the presumptive Democratic nominee. She told the country, we're not going back.
Donald Trump wants to take our country backward. He and his extreme Project 2025 agenda will weaken the middle class. Like, we know we got to take this seriously. Can you believe they put that thing in writing? America has tried these failed economic policies before, but we are not going back. We are not going back. Not going back. We're not going back. We are not going back. And I'll tell you why we're not going back. Because ours is a fight for the future.
Look, this campaign is going to be about a whole lot of things. Yes, it's about the woman who wants to protect abortion rights against the man who took those rights away. Yes, it's also about the prosecutor against the criminal. But maybe more than anything, as a big umbrella, it's about whether or not this country wants to go back. And not just back to the chaos of the Trump years that we all remember so well, we still talk about, but to even darker times in American history. I mean, luckily, as Kamala Harris just pointed out, they put their plan to take us back in writing. It's literally posted online. I can't believe they did that either. So here's just a little taste of how far back that plan wants to take the country. I mean, Project 2025 wants to use the Comstock Act to ban most abortions nationwide. That would take us back to 1873. Project 2025 wants to eliminate birthright citizenship, a key part of the 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868. And Project 2025 wants to fire tens of thousands of civil servants who aren't sufficiently loyal to Trump and replace them with sycophants and loyalists, which would fly in the face of a law passed for good reason in 1883. So yeah, Kamala Harris in so many ways might just be the right candidate at the right time. The right candidate for this century, by the way. She might be the right candidate to tell the country that actually we don't have to go back. To tell the country that actually back wasn't so great for lots of Americans and that we can go forward instead. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is going to be easy. It is not. Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate and the Republican apparatus behind them will regroup. They will throw everything. It's going to be gross, misogynistic, sexist, racist, all of the things. Harris herself conceded yesterday that she is the underdog in this race, and that's how everybody should treat it. But I have to say, in the early days of this campaign, Donald Trump is kind of flailing, while Vice President Harris seems very eager to make her case.
I'm ready to debate Donald Trump. I have agreed to the previously agreed upon September 10th debate. He agreed to that previously. Now it appears he's backpedaling, but I'm ready. And I think the voters deserve to see the split screen that exists in this race on a debate stage. And so I'm ready. Let's go.
There it is. She's ready. Let's go. Her words. Or the question is, do we want to go back? This election is going to be about a lot of things. None of them may be more important than that.
That was MSNBC's Jen Psaki perfectly laying out the case in this race. Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump really summed up in one question. Do we want to go back? Do we want to go back to the chaos of Donald Trump? Do we want to go back to the failed policies of Donald Trump? And worst of all, do we want to go back to a place that is not just a couple of years ago when Donald Trump was president, 4 years ago, but 40, 50, 60 years ago, a place where women have their reproductive freedom stripped, a place where LGBTQ plus rights are rolled back, a place where we see our civil liberties stripped away because of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Project 2025. Do we want to go back to that time? And our answer must be no. Do we want to go back to a time in which Republicans who were in charge claimed climate change was a hoax, where they didn't care about our future, when all they cared about was passing big tax cuts for corporations and their wealthy friends? No, we do not want to go back to that time. And someone who does a great job framing the race, talking about how we can't go back, is Pete Buttigieg. And he had this to say.
This answer that J.D. Vance gave a few years ago, and he name-dropped you in it about people who don't have children working in the government. This is what he said.
It's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Now, I should note you have two children. They were born before Pete gave that answer. Harris is also a stepmom to children as well. But what's your response to that?
The really sad thing is he said that after Chasten and I had been through a fairly heartbreaking setback in our adoption journey. He couldn't have known that, but maybe that's why you shouldn't be talking about other people's children. And it's not about his kids or my kids or the vice president's family. It's about your family, people's families whose well-being will depend on whether we go into a future led by somebody like Kamala Harris, who is focused on expanding the prosperity, the freedom, the well-being of our families. And by the way, especially if you have kids and you're worried about climate, choosing between a party that has a plan on climate that creates jobs and a party that still calls it a hoax, even as we went through the hottest day in world history. Or do you want your children to grow up in a country defined by a return to the chaos and recrimination and cruelty that was the hallmark of the Trump era?
So Pete in that clip is responding to the gross and frankly disgraceful attacks that J.D. Vance has made on people who just want to live a different lifestyle than him. And it's so funny to me that the Republican Party claims to be about freedom, but anyone who has a different lifestyle than them or wants to live a different way, they want to criticize and attack and come after and try to make them change. It doesn't feel very freedom to me, but MAGA isn't very truthful. It's a party of hypocrisy, and we know this. But I think it's so important the way that Pete is framing the race and the way that he talks about not just if you have children, your children, not just young people and my generation of Gen Z. It's not just about that future. It's about the continued future of America, making sure that we have a planet, making sure that we have a democracy. And that's something my generation really understands, that democracy really is one election away from being gone. I grew up in the time of Donald Trump. I know that democracy is always on the ballot, and it makes us want to fight that much harder. And so Pete frames this race in such a great way. But I think another important framing to put on it, not just the future versus the past, in the way that Donald Trump is older and Kamala Harris is obviously younger, but to talk about which candidate is looking in which direction. Obviously, Donald Trump wants to go back to 2020 and attack his political opponents, get revenge. That's what he cares about. That's what he's focused on. He's focused on the past. But of course, Kamala Harris is focused on the future, building a better future, building a future in which our rights are preserved and protected, one in which we invest in infrastructure, lower prescription drug prices, battle climate change, do all these things to make our country better. And so this election, while it is about two people, the convicted felon and career corrupt criminal versus the career prosecutor who has spent her life in public service, sure, it is obviously about those two people. But it is also about what happens when those two people aren't in politics anymore. And hopefully that's 8 years from now for Kamala Harris after she served 2 terms as president. And hopefully that's as soon as possible for Donald Trump. But this election is about what happens in the future and whether we keep our democracy. And that is what's so important, that we frame this as the future, that it's not just the doom and gloom of what could happen if Donald Trump was elected. And sure, that is incredibly important. We have to outline the dangers of what would happen if Donald Trump was elected. But we should also take joy in the fact that we have the opportunity to elect Kamala Harris, elect someone who will continue the historic record of President Joe Biden, continue the consequential policymaking of Joe Biden, that we have the opportunity to vote for a historic candidate for president. We should take joy in this election. It is not only the fight against Donald Trump and him trying to destroy our democracy, but it is also a joyous act that we have the opportunity to campaign and fight to preserve and protect our democracy and to keep it going forward. And once we have protected that democracy, to use it, to work with it, to improve our country. And that's something that I'm excited about. And if you are as well, and if you want to join a movement that is so excited about that, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, you join our channel, and you hit the like button, hit the thumbs up. It really goes a long way in boosting these videos and growing our positivity on this channel. And it would really mean the world to me. And until next time, I will see you soon.